Next up is acceptance of the agenda. Can I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Very good. Discussion on this. We're going to move things around because, Kyle, can you tell the board about what the council recently adopted?
So for this month, or around this month, it's Ramadan, and the council has enacted kind of policy for meetings this month that all meetings will finish by sundown. So that's at 7:56 this evening. So we can get through as much as we can get through, and then if something needs to be tabled for next month, we can take a motion to have that opened and tabled for the June meeting.
Right. So given that, we need to make sure that the folks that are here this evening, they're going to be moved up. C is going to be first up, and then we'll shift A and B down. So we are going to hear the Riverside Estates project first on the agenda. All right. Given that, all those in favor of the amended agenda? Very good. Next up, approval of the minutes of December 19th, 2018. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Very good. Any edits, corrections? I looked briefly. I did not have a chance to go through them thoroughly. Any comments? Hearing none. All those in favor? Very good. Flying right along. Next up, new business. Again, we're going to start with the amendment to a November 16th, 2016 approved subdivision plan titled Riverside Estates located on Union Street, tax map 31-2, lot 1 for M&M Truck Sales, Inc. The proposed amendment is to provide the adequate frontage for the parcel of land labeled additional land on the original plan at the end of Union Street for the proposed use of a single-family home. Could I have the applicant step up and be hidden by the screen there? You could just tell us who you are and what you propose.
I'm Maury Thayer from M&M Truck Sales, and we're proposing an amendment to the subdivision plan for Riverview Estates to allow a single-family home to be built on the additional land at the end of Union Street. It's about 27 acres. We've added, or potentially can add 75 feet of road frontage on Union Street to make it a conforming lot.
Very good. Thank you. Seems like a relatively simple project, but yeah, I guess you can stay there. And now before we open up a public hearing this evening, Kyle, could you just give us, you provided a written summary. Could you just hit the high spots there?
Right. So the original subdivision was the 8 lots on Union Street in the end of 2016. And then there were 2 kind of lots next to that that weren't part of the subdivision, but were called remaining land and additional land. And there was a condition put on the approval of the original subdivision that at the time of that subdivision, no sidewalk was being put in place. But because of the scale of the project at the time, and the public works director thought that it wasn't worth the maintenance and dealing with that infrastructure for something of that scale. So a condition was put in place that any future development of the remaining land or additional land would come back to the planning board to see if it warranted having that sidewalk put in place. So I called it an amended subdivision, but that was really, for lack of a better term, it was really based on this condition that any development would trigger going back to the planning board on these 2 parcels. So as Mr. Thayer stated, really the idea was to take 75 feet from the remaining land and give it to the additional land to give it the adequate frontage of 125 feet. So that lot would be a legally conforming lot and able for a single-family home to be permissible use on there. I also spoke with Rob Yerxa, the Public Works Director, to see if he thought the addition of a single-family home warranted that need for that infrastructure now, and he still thought kind of the same as he did then, that doesn't really add kind of a sizable enough scale to warrant the construction of a sidewalk for that subdivision. I put in the recommendations at the end that, should future development come to the lot in a more impactful subdivision, that it would have to come back to the planning board again and be reviewed just like the original conditions.
So just so I'm following along, and that was my question when I was looking over that, what level would require the sidewalk? So if the remaining land and then the additional land, if those were developed, then Rob would.
So it's really, it was left vague. No definitive amount of development was said that's what's going to trigger the sidewalk. I imagine it would just be a decision, a recommendation by staff, and then the decision made by the planning board. But in the minutes of that original discussion, it did use the terms, I think, sizable development or development of scale or something to indicate a larger subdivision, not just a single family home.
Right. But this was also for the lots along Union Street as well. So
yes.
Yeah. So maybe, I don't know if the remaining land, but if they touch the remaining land or the additional land, they'll have to come back here again. Well, not the additional land, because that just has a single house, but the remaining land, if they carve that up, then.
Right, and there would potentially be enough land. The additional land is a large enough parcel that you could put a single family home there, and then eventually down the line,
extend the road.
Could be made to, split that up. And, not that any of that is, it's all.
Correct. No, we're just looking at,
But yeah, so just that original condition remains, that even if a single family home is agreed upon now, if any future development on those two parcels happens, it would come back for.
That's all I wanted to make sure for our walkability purposes, that we'd have to come back again and we'd revisit that. All right, before I open up the public hearing, any other questions from the applicant? There's not a lot to this. All right, thank you. I'm going to open up the public hearing and invite anybody who may have just walked in. That we're just reviewing a subdivision amendment. So if anybody from the audience would like to step up and speak in favor or against, please state your name. And
Yeah. Jamie Comstock. I live at 1 Brook Street in Orono. So I didn't get to see the presentation, but my concern is that this could be an attempt. First of all, are we talking about the subdivision request on Union Street in the basin? Okay. So my concern actually is that this could be an attempt to incrementally get this neighborhood to absorb more development than it has the infrastructural capacity to absorb. So we approved 8 homes. Now I'm coming back. I'm going to ask for another one. Next year, I'll come back and I'll ask for another one. That's my concern. I don't know how many amendments can be approved over what amount of time. Most of the neighborhood showed up. The last time the plan was brought forth, I think that you remember some of the concerns. There are 40 homes down there currently, one way in, one way out of the neighborhood. So egress and access is a concern to all of us down there.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Very good. This is just one single family home. They added the frontage, so that remaining lot. So I think I can take a stab at your question.
Sure,
If they were going to expand any more, they've got to come back before us.
Okay.
So
and
you would be notified as a butters. Right now, we're just considering the additional frontage at the end. So they're taking a little bit off just to create enough frontage so they can actually put a house on the remaining land at the end of that street.
So that would mean the turnaround there, like right where the turnaround currently is?
I don't think the turnaround changes as far as I know.
So
It's not proposed, but
I put a condition
Yep.
on the approval that the turnaround would be left
Right.
the same. The lot line would be changed to kind of divide that turnaround between 2 different parcels, but the turnaround itself would still remain.
so right now, there wasn't enough frontage. There's the dead end of that street, which is
Yep.
about 50 feet. So they don't have the 125 they needed. So that 75
Okay,
gives them that frontage, but the turnaround on the 75 face
yep,
stays the same,
okay.
but it allows them to put a single family on that lot at the end.
Is this a picture of this right here?
Nope.
No, okay.
We do have, I mean, there's an application packet, but
I have
Yep. yeah, if you want to.
Yeah, if I could take a look at it, that would be great.
Right now, in answer to your question, the infrastructure, all right, we need to have you up at the mic.
Yeah.
This is a public hearing. So in
Sure.
answer to your question, I think just before you walked in, the summary of the project, the Public Works Director has weighed in saying that the infrastructure, so there was discussion of a sidewalk and pedestrian safety,
Great.
and that's still on the table eventually. His opinion for the town was that the addition of the single-family home still does not warrant, it doesn't meet the scale, in his opinion, to necessitate that sidewalk.
Okay,
So that's the infrastructure. That was the only comment that we received from town staff, but that's our Public Works Director. So
yes.
we
yes.
wouldn't, over the last project, we've got a single-family house, so nothing's really changed all that significantly, and he weighed in. That's part of our consideration this evening.
Sure, yeah, I was just wanting to voice my concern that,
Yep.
Again, in 18 months, 24 months, I'll be back here saying,
Right.
great,
Well-
we have another house proposed.
Right.
So
And
I
that-
just
that's
wanted
how
to
it
get
works.
that on the radar.
So you'll be notified as in a butter
Yep.
if anything comes down the pike again.
And where is this house going to be?
No idea.
No idea.
We don't need to review that at this point.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Any other comments? Those? So I'm going to leave the public hearing open for a little bit longer. So any discussion from the board? Right, I think the concerns have been addressed. I wanted to hear what Rob said, and he had comment in the application. I couldn't come up with anything else at this point. All right, last call for public comment. Would you like to make another public comment before I close the public hearing?
Look at this, please. Explain something.
Okay.
Bill, can I make a couple
You may.
of comments in the meantime? So in the list of recommendations, I would add one recommendation that I didn't put in there that I kind of thought of after the fact, to indicate as a condition that a building permit would only be issued for one single family home. So
Okay.
through the code enforcement office, if you decide to approve tonight, that it would only be for one single family home. And
Okay, building permit will only be issued for one single family home. I see Lisa writing down.
anything,
Good to go. Very good. I'm going to close the public hearing. Further comment? Nope. All right. I think we're ready for proposed findings of fact first. Do we cover that before we get any motions?
okay.
Yeah.
I think we're good. All right, I'm going to read into the record. These are proposed findings of fact that we're going to consider for this project. Again, proposed findings of fact for the Riverside Estate subdivision, M&M Truck Sales, Inc. Amended subdivision review dated May 15th, 2019 pursuant to Article 7, Section 18-210 and a condition of approval of the 2016 approved Riverside Estates subdivision, the Orono Planning Board has considered the application of M&M Truck Sales, Inc. for amended subdivision approval, so to provide the lot called additional land with 75 feet of additional frontage in the medium-density residential district, and to determine whether or not the construction of a sidewalk in the subdivision is needed. Based on all evidence presented by the applicant, reviewing agencies, town departments, and the public, the planning board has found the following. Number one, lots that the minimum dimensions are met for the lot called additional land in the medium-density residential district, and that the lot is buildable with appropriate lot sizes, sidelines, lot frontages, shapes, and suitable locations for driveway access. Are there any issues with that? Hearing none. Number two, streets, traffic, pedestrians, and parking, that the construction of one single-family home does not constitute significant development, and the decision made on the original subdivision application by the planning board to delay the construction of a sidewalk should be continued and upheld until a time in the future that the remaining land or additional land is developed further. Any issues with that? All right. With those read in the record, I think we're ready for a motion. Who wants it? Lisa, I saw you writing. You're up.
So it's been so long that I'm not sure I remember how to do this. All right. I move that we vote on the proposed finding of facts of the Riverside Estates subdivision, M&M Truck Sales, Inc., the amended subdivision review, May 15th, 2019. And then do I read these recommendations in, or?
Yes, please.
Okay. With the additional recommendations, number one, all conditions of the original approved subdivision plan, River State Estates, shall remain. Specifically, quote, if such remaining or additional land is developed in the future and the Orono Planning Board determines such infrastructure to be necessary to serve this subject subdivision as well as the new development, no permit shall be issued for such remaining or additional land until the planning board has made its determination. Number two, the area on the amended subdivision plan marked temporary turnaround easement shall remain in place and the easement stay in force even with a change in lot line. Number three, the amended subdivision plan must be recorded at the Penobscot County Registry of Deeds within 90 days of the date of approval. And number four, building permit will only be issued for one single family home.
Very good. I think that covers it. Thank you, Lisa. Very good. So we have a motion. We got a second. No, actually, we're all set. We're just ready for the vote. Or didn't? Yeah, I think we're just ready for the vote. What?
Second.
All right, there we go. A motion. We have a second. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? It is unanimous. All right, next up, we're moving on to a proposed land use ordinance amendment to section 18-145 wireless telecommunications facilities to recognize that certain types of wireless telecommunications facilities, such as antennas, can be placed inside of existing and enclosed structures and should be considered as an accessory use. This seemed like a lot of housekeeping to me. Is that correct? Maybe some new issues?
For the most part.
Yep.
The technology changes in these types of facilities. Antennas have gotten smaller and are now able to go inside of existing structures, and the structures can use that as a way to kind of rent out some space that they're not otherwise using. So that's one aspect. Another aspect is the section has this list of exemptions that don't have to go through the site plan process. But according to the way this was worded before, if you look at number 5 in the crossed out section, antennas as accessory uses, residential homes with satellite dishes should be getting a permit for their TV dish as an accessory structure, which doesn't really seem like a relevant thing this day and age. Also, anyone with a wireless router, which would be an antenna, technically those aren't even allowed by the language in our ordinance now. So it's really, those couple of things are just bringing it kind of up to represent modern times and technology, and also to allow the antennas, as long as they're in an existing enclosed structure, to be just considered an accessory use, instead of having to go through the full site plan process, which that section was more so geared when it was created to the standalone structures of a large scale that have a really drastic aesthetic kind of impact on a community. And a lot of the standards in that section are geared towards kind of masking them and not taking away the character of the neighborhood that it's in. So for those that are completely enclosed, that's not really the same sort of issue, and probably shouldn't be reviewed in the same kind of manner.
Makes sense. Very good. So tonight we have a public hearing, so
So the council committee referred it to the planning board, so now it's up to the planning board to make a recommendation and potentially send it back to council for their public hearing.
very good. I'm going to open up the public hearing and invite all of the attendees to step up to the mic. Please state your name. So I guess we'll have discussion from the board then. Unless, Dave, you want to weigh in? Okay.
I've heard it several times.
All right. Good enough. Just checking. All right. Discussion from the board. You know, it seems fairly straightforward. I'm surprised that a router would catch somebody up so that they were in violation of our land use ordinance. But I mean, if it's housekeeping and this covers us, then
I mean, I think it was just the definition was created probably before something like that was really that common. So,
and I'm assuming there are ordinance templates where so all of the exemptions, this covers us for the next 5 years, maybe.
right. So the exemptions in place were clearly taken from somewhere else as I was looking through.
Good enough.
And then so the ones that created were similar as other communities have created.
Any further discussion? I mean, we need to make a recommendation to the council, but
Can
I
I
really
just
didn't see an
ask
issue.
one question that I was confused about?
Sure.
You said these things could be inside somebody's home, and so therefore that you could use that home for another purpose or something? What
No,
did you
not
say?
so much if you look at number 5, it's an antenna licensed by the Federal Communications Commission that is an accessory use to a commercial or institutional use. So it wouldn't go in someone's home. The ones geared towards residential nature are number 6 and 7. The more TV, internet type kind of technologies. Number 5 is geared towards a lot of churches or other type of institutional buildings with kind of odd shapes that have spaces in them that aren't really used for the most part. They can rent out those spaces for antennas to go inside and kind of create a better service for people in the area, and also they get some money back for renting out the space. And also it keeps the standalone structures from needing to be placed around the community because we have more of the smaller nature.
interesting.
All right, thank you.
Just sort of a shift in the way that technology has worked, but it would only be in commercial or institutional, not
Gotcha.
residential.
All right, thank you.
Others?
It would be no different than the days of two-way radios, like a repeater. Remember the repeaters that used, so you could extend the distance on a two-way radio? It just goes to the repeater, and the repeater sends it to the next.
Exactly. Yeah, the larger scale ones I think are still the main part, but then you have these smaller scale ones along the way that kind of bridge the gaps. That's my understanding.
Other questions? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing. And I guess recommendation to the board, I mean, just a general agreement that we approve of the language that you provided.
Great.
The amendment.
Yeah, a recommendation by the board to
All right. So can I have a
council for public hearing.
Can I have a motion?
I move that we approve the amendment to land use ordinance entitled Wireless Telecommunications Facilities. Is that sufficient?
Probably. I don't know. little bit more detail if you just want to read that paragraph
Okay.
and again.
The purpose of this ordinance amendment is to recognize that there's been a change in the technology regarding wireless telecommunication facilities, and therefore Section 18-145 of the Land Use Ordinance, which deals with the standards for these facilities, should be updated to better represent current practices.
Perfect. All right, we have a motion. Can I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Very good. Moving on, we're flying now. Last public hearing, we have an amendment to a November 16th, a proposed land use ordinance amendment that would add a new section 18-151, temporary markets, to recognize temporary markets as a land use that brings value to the community, as well as implement standards to prevent any negative impacts on areas surrounding temporary markets. Again, Kyle, if you could review your summary for us.
Sure. So this term, temporary markets, would include all type of outside markets, farmers markets, flea markets. There was a, set up with tents selling artwork or something like that. But the idea is that these temporary markets don't have a specific use in our table of land uses. So if someone comes in and wants to do something like this, we have to permit it as the next closest thing. So a farmer's market needs to be permitted as a retail store or something. But the standards for a permanent structure are different than what the standards should be for something that's temporary and maybe only happens once a week for a few months out of the year. So this is acknowledging that these temporary markets are a use that currently exists in Orono and exists well, but could also be something that happens more so in the future if new markets of any type wanted to come in and operate. And while I think the town has had good experience with the farmers market and other markets in town, they are still a land use in the sense that they bring in traffic and they have a lot of the other impacts that more permanent land uses have. So there should be some guiding standards to look at when those come in, but they should be more specialized and geared towards the temporary nature of those markets, and they shouldn't have to abide by the same standards that a more permanent structure has to abide by.
Thank you. Again, I'm going to open up the public hearing. Invite the same people to step up to the mic. I'll leave it open. Now discussion from the board. I did have one question because I know the current farmers market has that nice sign across from the steam plant on the university side. So I was thinking of that because I read through and said no remnant of the temporary market shall remain at the location after the hours of operation. So that's a deviation from that. And I mean, it's a nice looking sign, but it's a permanent marker. And then they have the temporary signs that they put at the intersection there and a couple other areas, but.
Right. So any existing market would be essentially grandfathered in. So that would be a part of that for the farmers market. But yeah, I mean, I guess going forward with future markets, if someone came in and wanted to put up a similar sign, then.
It's nice. We go to the market a ton and I see Sean Beckett there. I think every weekend we go, but that sign looks nice and that's a permanent structure. So I was wondering whether the limitations of this would prevent that. Not that we have a ton of markets coming in here, but yeah.
All I can think of is, are you avoiding the possibility of, like, have you been down Route 1 in Belfast and Searsport, the flea markets that are there, and they're basically there for the summer?
Right. The objective is to not have any tables, or if something's happening on consecutive days, not to have things left out overnight, that the takedown has to happen on
It would have to be completely vacant. And
Right.
whoever was flea marketing would have to come back in, set everything back up again.
Right. It could explore, the idea of signage kind of being something considered differently.
That's just using the current farmers market as the example because they have the permanent sign. So not that we need to dive in too deeply there, but that sign looks pretty nice. And people, it's advertised all through the week. So if you're driving down College Ave and, it alerts you that there's a Tuesday market or a Saturday market, then great. I don't know, does anybody have any?
I agree completely with your point, and it gives the community useful information as to when they can go to the farmer's market.
Right.
So it benefits the community.
So I'm wondering, so if we left it as is and somebody wanted a sign, they would have to come before the planning board? Not that there would be another market, I just thought of that sign. So I'm just wondering if somebody else came in, wanted a permanent sign as written, they'd have to come back to us.
So right now, the distinction, the way I've written it, is that any temporary market would be a permit if it was under 15,000 square feet in sales area, and over 15,000 square feet, it would come to the planning board. So
Yeah, I'm wondering, I'm just thinking too, whether you could add it, because I looked for it and I didn't see the signage piece. If maybe in addition to that maybe on a staff level, that signage could be approved. I don't want it to waste the board's time just to come in and approve a sign, but maybe you folks could
Right.
sort that out for us so we don't have to think about it. Just come up with some text, and if the board wants to move forward with this for the council, just add something about signage.
Sure. Yeah.
Using or thinking of the farmer's market as an example, just
Right.
for them to consider.
Yeah, I can do
I couldn't come up with anything else. That was.
I have one item.
Yeah.
And I guess what? I managed to find something about plants. Okay, product and services, we have item II, prohibited. Products expressly prohibited are live animals, invasive terrestrial plants, and then we go on to weapons and fireworks. I think we should strike terrestrial, remove that, because sometimes people are selling aquatic plants, and those can be invasive as well.
Mhm.
And if we say invasive terrestrial plants, that almost says that invasive aquatic plants are okay.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's a simple.
Very good point, yes.
Other additions, comments, edits? Seemed like a good idea to me. All right, last call for public hearing. Public hearing is closed. All right, any further discussion? Not, I think we're ready for a motion with the changes that we've suggested. Putting the pressure on you, Lisa.
I know. You'll help me, though. I move that we accept the proposed amendment to Orono Land Use Ordinance to implement standards for temporary markets. Do you want me to read the legislative intent into that?
No, I was just, sometimes it just, you kind of reread the agenda item. And a lot of times that has enough information.
All right.
And also his review sheet, but do we need anything more? Maybe we keep it that simple.
You want me to read just the agenda part?
Yeah, let's
Okay.
do that. Just for,
A proposed land use ordinance amendment that would add a new section 18-151 temporary markets to recognize temporary markets as a land use that brings value to the community, as well as implement standards to prevent any negative impacts on areas surrounding temporary markets. Do you want me to add what we're
with the discussed
Yeah.
changes, I think that's.
with the
good.
discussed changes?
There we go. Very good. Thank you, Lisa. So we have a motion. We have a second. Further discussion? All those in favor? All right, Kyle, I think you have time.
Yeah.
All right, let's do it.
Mike's on for this?
Nope, leave them on.
Oh, is this thing?
Well, if we have questions for you as you go, we want that on the record.
Copies of the presentation, and a quiz. Usually do that quiz as it goes along.
Is Bell giving us a few minutes after the stormwater a bit? I think it's, yeah, do your thing and then we'll fill out the paper and give it back to you. Thank you.
No extra tests. In case we get run out. It's known to the public.
Yep.
Going to turn that off, just so
That's
the
fine.
video plays really softly. All right, so this presentation is for our part of the requirement for general permit. So I've kind of geared, this is the planning board discussing development, oftentimes kind of geared it towards going over some basic stormwater impacts, overview, but also applying to low impact development and how development can address. First video that you may or may not have seen before. You put the mic on. Sorry, this isn't.
It wouldn't hurt to have people hear what you have to say? Or, I mean, can people see the screen if you move that? Or either way, whatever.
Don't grip on this.
It's 7:39, you got time?
I'll just start playing.
Yeah. I'm not sure if anybody can hear that. But
Yeah, did anyone?
I couldn't hear.
Well, the main points are that, you know, your waste, you know, litter or your lawn care in your driveway, you know, basically the stormwater runoff captures any sort of, you know, materials left behind. And the more impervious surface there is, the faster that runoff is going to go, and the more of the litter and the more of the, you know, any harsh chemicals it's going to pick up and drain into the sewer system and the waterways. So using some of the recommendations are
Where does stormwater go? Just follow the flow. Stormwater is rain and snowmelt that flows over hard surfaces, washes down storm drains, and ends up in ditches.
it is on our website, the Stormwater Group website.
yes.
Salt
Yeah.
and snow
So if you
detergents from water is rain and flows over hard.
wanted to watch more of the video, yeah, it's on the BASWA BASWG website, and they have all the kind of tips as for, you know, how to better solve and how to better wash your car. So just an overview, an MS4, MS4 stands for a Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. The state DEP authorizes this general permit for the MS4s, and it's, you know, the permit basically authorizes the municipalities to discharge stormwater to waters of the state, other than groundwater, pursuant to the Water Pollution Control Law. The permit is a 5-year permit, although currently we are beyond our 5 years. We're going into year 7.
Pretty soon, yeah, we're in year 6.
So the permit's been in a little bit of a standstill, but traditionally 5 years, and you know, you have to abide by kind of new metrics each year, and you know, continually improve on what you're doing as a municipality to deal with stormwater through different areas. One of those is the general permit requires permittees to develop a stormwater program management plan to reduce and eliminate stormwater runoff. So the towns create this plan to address, you know, stormwater runoff in their communities. Part of that plan, you know, you have these 6 minimum control measures, they're called, and that's the basis of a community's stormwater management plan. One is the public outreach and education, which is part of why we're doing this here. It's to educate kind of town employees and staff and elected officials on, you know, stormwater and, you know, why it's an important issue and why it needs to be addressed. You know, 2, public involvement and participation. You know, things like the street and stream cleanup fall under that. Illicit discharge detection and elimination, construction, site stormwater runoff control. So, you know, when we have inspections going on construction sites, you know, part of that is monitoring that, you know, erosion control measures are in place, so kind of sediments aren't going into our waterways that shouldn't be.
The cleanup is this weekend, too.
Yes, yeah. Cleanup is this weekend for anyone who's free on Saturday. Post-construction stormwater management, and then pollution prevention, good housekeeping for municipal operations. So, you know, these 6, you know, control measures are really just metrics, and then the, you know, community is able to kind of implement whatever methods they see fit to kind of address each one. So low impact development refers to systems and practices that use or mimic natural processes that result in the infiltration, evapotranspiration, or use of stormwater in order to protect water quality. So there are really two ways to address stormwater if you have more impervious cover and you're creating a lot of runoff. You can engineer systems, and kind of create these man-made engineered systems to address it, and those generally, come at a cost and create more infrastructure. Or there's been this kind of trend of going towards low impact development techniques where you kind of build in the stormwater kind of dealing with that issue into the development itself. So we'll go over a few different examples of approaches and techniques. But really, low impact development is an approach to land development that works with nature to manage stormwater, as opposed to trying to control nature or overcome something. So I mean, think of putting in a giant paved parking lot. You've put in this piece of infrastructure, but then you need to put in another piece of infrastructure to manage all the stormwater. Versus if you just used a different type of material for the parking lot and addressed the stormwater and the parking all in one aspect. Can also be referred to as green infrastructure. And low impact development principles include preserving natural landscape features, minimizing impervious surfaces, and creating site drainage that treats stormwater as a resource rather than a waste product. So just running through, I think, 3 examples here. One, rain garden / bioretention facility. They're kind of the same idea, but on a different scale. Rain gardens are usually smaller. Bioretention facilities are of larger, more kind of technical scale. One example of this in town is outside the Penobscot Valley Dermatology. They use that as part of managing their stormwater there. It's usually shallow constructed depression, deep-rooted native plants, and strategically located in areas where drainage is flowing to capture as much runoff as possible. The soil and the vegetation allows to filter some of the pollutants that the runoff is carrying, recharges groundwater, and reduces flooding potential, as well as creating a habitat for insects or area. Second, permeable pavement. It's a porous surface that can catch surface runoff. So as opposed to using traditional asphalt for things like parking lots or driveways, the pavement itself is allowing the water to kind of run through and filter down slowly and disperse into the earth, as opposed to having large amounts of water rushing by. Can also, a lot of the same principles where it's reducing the concentration of some pollutants. One of the big things with some of these LID techniques is that they have a higher initial cost. So they seem unattractive to people and developers because it's more of an upfront cost. But kind of as I mentioned before, you're building, if you use permeable pavement as an example, you're building one piece of infrastructure as opposed to multiple. If you were building, say, a parking lot and then a method to capture the stormwater, you could just build a parking lot and have it capture stormwater right there. And the last one, vegetated roofs and green roofs, where you have vegetation on top of residential buildings, commercial buildings, bus stops, which I think is interesting as our regional transportation group is looking at installing more bus stops. I think could be something interesting to potentially look at. Water stored by the underlying layer, then taken up by the plants and then returned to the atmosphere, reduces and delays stormwater runoff just as the other kind of previous techniques do. Retains 70 to 90% of precipitation in the summer and 25 to 40% in winter, and reduces, aside from the kind of stormwater aspects of these, there are other aspects as well that are beneficial. For this, it reduces the urban heat island effect, which in the more downtown aspects of a community where there's more pavement and more buildings that can be useful and improves the air quality by capturing some airborne pollutants as well as the runoff. So that's it. Just a quick little presentation. I just think it's something good for myself and the planning board to be in mind of as we see development come in. We don't have anything specifically in our ordinances that say LID has to be used, but it could be something to keep in mind as we
talked about it in the comp plan though.
right. And yeah,
So
I
it
think
was a lot of discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, encouraging that.
Yeah.
Green roofs do happen in Maine. There's one down in the Hannaford in Augusta, right by the old Coney High School, right over there. So there's successful examples in Maine. Not a lot of them. I think there's a new proposed green roof down in Portland, newer development down there. And you remember with the Avenue, they had an enormous section of pervious pavement. So they ended up switching up that design, you recall, to do tree box filters. So they replaced that, but we almost had one of the biggest pervious pavement projects in the whole area, which I was looking forward to it, but oh well, next time.
well, and the disc golf course that came in December, I mean, that was another example using the kind of vegetated gravel mix, as a way to let the runoff
Right.
go.
You're just going to see more and more of this, though. So, the way of the future. So everybody filled out their tests?
Yep.
All right. Thank you, Kyle. That was great.
Quickly.
Yeah, the video is kind of cool. We watched another version Belle showed us last time.
Yeah.
But that one is a whiteboard video, the same marketing group that's helping us out. They did a real good job.
Yeah, I can send the video.
Yeah, maybe just
so
yeah.
everyone
Why
can-
don't you? That would be a good idea, so people can hear it. Very good. Next up on our agenda is discussion. Hearing none, so just quickie summary next month. You repeat what we have on tap.
Tell me the date too.
So there will be a slight ordinance amendment for vernal pools. It was, we got our final partially delegated authority through BEP. So there was just a couple conditions, minor changes that were made to the ordinance. So that's been through council committee and they referred it to the planning board. So that'll be for next month. The Orono paddlers group has been, looking at putting a storage for their canoes and kayaks at Brownies Beach. So that might be ready for June.
So just a quick question, because we are about done. If nothing else comes before the board, are we going to have a meeting just for the vernal pool ordinance? Or can we stock up and push that back? I'm just asking. Not sure that it'd be worth our time coming in for that item.
Right, it's very small. I want to run by Evan to see if it was something that needed to get done by a specific day. If there was no deadline, I would say it could probably wait. But if there is if BEP put some condition on it that it had to be
Right.
done.
Just please don't call us in here for just one item. If you can stack them up like today, that's
That's the SAM program. I don't think that there's anything pending that would apply to that, is there?
No.
No, so it's just nearly no big deal. You can
Right.
wait a month easily.
just be nice to us if you can, if we don't have many items.
Yep.
Very good. Thank you. Last up, we got to be out of here on time. Adjournment. Have a motion?
So moved.
Very good. Second.
Second.
Discussion? None? All those in favor?
Did you catch
Thank you.
why it was that we needed to finish up by 8 o'clock?
Because it's already done.
Oh.
That's it.